Your brain is playing a game on you, which I call the matrix. There are things in your belief system that are that ubiquitous, that ever-present, that much of a foundational building block of who you are, that you don't even question it. What is the best thing that I could do to build Quest? So Quest was meant to be my forever company. I had written these 25 bullet points called the Quest belief system, and they were the things that I had to do to my mind in order to go from staying in bed because I'm cold to being able to actually execute at the highest level of business. Money is amazing. It is incredibly powerful. The reason people will forever chase it is money is real, because money facilitates. Man, let me tell you, like, I have been poor and I have been rich, and rich is way better. So it's when people don't understand it that its real power is merely to facilitate your most beautiful dreams. When you do that, and when your beautiful dreams serve other people, there's nothing better. When people doubt me, Brian, it's a gift. I love that because I believe in beauty and rage, and you need both. I need people to love me. I also want to prove a lot of people wrong. I want to crush the enemies that want to see me fail.
It's all your fault. What does that mean?
Your life is 100% exactly a reflection of the choices you make. And the moment that you're willing to accept this is my fault, you're back in control. And isn't that awesome? To know that anything, if I had made different choices, I could have gotten a different outcome.
This week on the show, I have Tom Bilyeu, who's one of the founders of Quest Nutrition. This is a billion-dollar company he created with two friends of his. It's all about creating protein and protein supplements, but that's not what Tom really wanted to do. He really wanted to broadcast. So he created a show called Inside Quest. Now it's called Impact Theory, where he interviews some of the most fascinating people on the planet, including a lot of people we spoke to, like Simon Sinek, Tim Ferriss, Wyclef Jean, and he's got an amazing way he thinks about the world. The most important concept that he has is something going from a fixed mindset as a human to a growth mindset. And it's funny because 15 years ago, he was in London with his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, and he was broke as a joke, sitting on his sofa, and he said it was the change in his brain that allowed him to accomplish so many things, like making the billion-dollar company and creating the media empire. I know you can learn a lot from Tom. One of his favorite expressions is, "It's all your fault," which is another way of looking at extreme ownership. And he also says, money is wonderful. If used in the right way, it can do incredible things as long as you're not just hoarding it. And so I think you're really going to enjoy your time with Tom, so sit back, relax for that. And if you want to broadcast yourself like Tom and me, you're in luck, because we have just created our Broadcast Yourself 8-week course where I teach you how to create a world-class podcast in 8 weeks. Everything is included: how to book guests, how to have great conversations, how to put it out there so you can connect with the world, have deep conversations, maybe find your purpose and your passion the way I did, and maybe turn it into a 7-figure media business. Why not? So go to londonreal.tv/broadcast. The course is probably almost expired now, and jump in there. It's going to be an amazing thing. And now I leave you with Mr. Tom Bilyeu. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Tom Bilyeu, the American broadcaster, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Quest Nutrition, the billion-dollar company known for its revolutionary corporate culture and mission. Most people know you as the host of Inside Quest and now Impact Theory, the business and mindset-focused interview show featuring conversations from some of the world's most amazing people, including Wyclef Jean, Simon Sinek, and Tim Ferriss. Tom, welcome to London Real.
Dude, thank you for having me on, man. I am a huge fan of the show and I use it in my research routinely. So first of all, I have a debt of gratitude to you, so thank you.
Thanks. I mean, it's great hearing that. You know, we're over here broadcasting, but we never know who's watching it where.
So true.
You know, you came in and you're like, I know this set. So, you know, it's great for us to hear.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Love what you're doing. And you have a crazy story as well. So I don't know where to jump in, but first let's talk about London. What are you doing here?
Well, my wife is British, so we were actually coming to Europe for the Cannes Lion, so the festival that's going on over there, and we could not come all the way to France and not stop in and see her family. So came here, staying with the in-laws, who were just beautiful human beings, and yeah, so was coming over, and this worked out perfectly.
You lived here 15 years ago.
I did.
What, I mean, like, I don't want to go too deep too quick, but what was Tom 15 years ago like?
Whoa.
Because like you land in Heathrow and you're like, you take the Piccadilly line up to wherever, you must be thinking, you know, I did this in 2001, 2002. Do you get weird flashbacks or not?
I don't. So we come here a lot. So I've now spent, I mean, cumulatively quite a bit of time in London. We, like I was saying before, we lived here for a year. I was a very different human being, to actually answer your question. And the first time I flew in, I felt like I was landing on the set of Mary Poppins, and I was freaking out. So I didn't even have a passport until the first time I came. So met this girl, she's British, and invites me to come see her, and I had to scramble and get my passport, and I come and land, and I was just flipping out and just so excited, and was that kid that always wanted to see the world but never really got a chance. But that's sort of the bright side. When I lived here, I had a fixed mindset, and so it was a very dark time in my life where I had trouble getting out of bed in the morning, and I had trouble getting out of bed not because I was depressed or anything, because I was lazy, like profoundly lazy. And as you know, in the winter here, it's cold, and it's not like in America where you can sort of make the house a nice even temperature. It's like you either sleep with the heat on, or you sleep with the heat off. And we slept with it off, so I'd wake up in a cold room, and I was so mentally weak that I couldn't get out of bed just because I was cold. It's pretty ridiculous. Looking back now, it hurts to think about.
Well, look, this can be a big culture shock. And you know, I got here in '97, then I went back to '99 to New York City, but I came back again in '02, right around when you did. Right after I was in New York City for 9/11, and then my whole life pretty much just almost blew apart in 2001. And so me coming here was like my rebirth, my cleansing, and I kind of built myself back up from January 2002. But you know, London at first to an American, it's just, sometimes it's weird, it's hard. It didn't have a lot of the conveniences of home that sometimes you expected.
That is very true.
I used to remember hearing all of my banker American friends and their wives complain they couldn't get a pizza past midnight. The cable wouldn't get installed on Sunday. High quality problems, but it took me years to get used to London. And now I love it. And London's matured so much now to where I think it's like one of the most avant-garde cities in the world. So now it's got great restaurants and entertainment. But back then, it still was rough around the edges, which probably didn't make it any easier for you.
It didn't. I mean, that wasn't like a big struggle point for me. Honestly, it really was. So I'm not a born entrepreneur, all right? So a lot of people talk about, oh, entrepreneurs are born not made. That is not my case. I am a hand-constructed entrepreneur. And so that time in my life was really before I had developed a growth mindset. So I didn't have control of my own mind, and so that makes you do a lot of really dumb and sad things. And at the time, like, I didn't have a job, and my then girlfriend, now wife, was like bringing home the money. It was just a very weird time for me. But actually didn't color negatively for me, London. My in-laws are incredible. The city is amazing and breathtaking. As somebody who grew up in Tacoma, Washington, like, coming here was legitimately like, it was my first real experience with a big city. So LA is a sprawling metropolis, but it doesn't feel like a big city. New York feels like a big city. London feels like a big city. At the time, I hadn't been to New York since I was 13, so I didn't really have a sense of it. So coming here was really, really magical. And so art is like my first love. And there's something about the architecture here that really draws you in. And it was the beginning of my transformation, quite frankly.
Wow. Well, I want to talk about that as we get on, because, you know, for you to just say that shocks people, you know, because they see how successful you are, and whether it's in monetary terms with Quest Nutrition or whether the latest stuff in the broadcasting and your mindset. But it's nice for people to plug in right now and know that 15 years ago, you know, you could have a hard time getting out of bed, and that it's just your mindset that's changed. So if people are listening, maybe they should just stay tuned a little bit more, because I want to get into that. But I guess we should start maybe at the end, and we'll go back to the beginning, because you're a broadcaster now. And most people probably know you for that first now. But why did you decide to start broadcasting?
Well, the honest answer is a game that I play called No Bullshit, What Would It Take? And so I've worked in the inner cities a lot, and I've seen the just absolutely dramatic negative impact that growing up in a certain environment has. So I refer to it as generational poverty. It has nothing to do with money, has everything to do with mindset. And going in there, so at Quest, we were literally manufacturing in Compton, California. So nice and famous for being very underprivileged. And so going into that area, hiring the local people, and I was really, it was really important to me to let people know whether you have criminal record, you know, you were in gangs, like I don't care about any of that. So what I would tell people is I don't care who you are today. All I want to know is who do you want to become and what's the price you're willing to pay to get there. And so we'll give you that chance. And once we put out into the neighborhood that you could apply for a job even if you had a criminal record, we literally had people like out and around the door, down the parking lot, waiting just to be interviewed, because no one will give you a shot. Once you have a criminal record, like getting back into the system is next to impossible. So we brought these people in, really gave them a chance to do something special with their life. And in that process, I begin to realize the mindset that these people are walking in the door with is so detrimental to a path of success. And it just planted a seed in my mind that at my most like honest with who I am and what do I want to accomplish, I want to pull people out of the matrix. Now, what I mean by that is to get them out of that generational poverty, that mindset of, it's just a whole bunch of limiting beliefs. It's, well, my parents told me that nobody wants to see me succeed. My parents told me that nobody, and my entire community, quite frankly, tell me that nobody ever escapes where I grew up. While, you know, success may be possible for other people, it's just not possible for someone like me. And so you would hear that all the time, all the time, all the time. And I used to ask the magic genie question. And I would say, hey, because I'm trying to find out who these people are, right? A magic genie shows up. It's going to grant you one wish and one wish only. You can't wish for anything for anybody else. Got to be totally selfish. Got to be something for you. You can't cure cancer, bring somebody back from the dead, none of that. What do? Universally, the answer was I want a job. Now, okay, fair enough. They're just saying that because I'm interviewing, you know, them for a job.
Not money.
So I'm like, not money. So that's total BS, which is what they secretly want, by the way.
Okay.
But they're not going to say that in a job interview. So I would push, you know, is it, you really want a job? Yeah, I really want a job. Isn't what you really want money? Like that's the whole thing that you're going to get out of this exchange. Yeah, actually, you're right. Okay, fine. I do want money. All right, fantastic. Brian, drum roll. How much money do you want? There's only one answer I ever got. You have a guess?
$1 million.
$1 million, baby. Now, $1 million doesn't even buy you a nice house. So that to me was like, this is a magic genie. I've had to talk you into being honest about the fact that you want money. And then once we actually get to money, the number you come up with is $1 million, which by the way, asking for money from a magic genie is a travesty to end all travesties. Don't ask for that. Right. But not even getting into that, like the fact that they couldn't think beyond $1 million was crazy. And it just shows like people don't really dare to dream big because they don't think it's possible. So for them, I'm sure the whole exercise was just absurd anyway, but like not allowing yourself to dream about what's really possible and then backing into the execution steps. So that became my obsession. Like how do you get mindset? Because that's all it is, right? Because I went from scrounging in my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car. That's a real story. To building $1 billion business, making myself fantastically wealthy in the process. So I know what that looks like. I know you don't, at least for me, I didn't start anywhere amazing. It was about having to shape myself into becoming capable of that. So seeing this mindset that's holding them back and asking the question, no bullshit, what would it take to give everyone a mindset that at least gives them the chance to succeed. They won't all succeed, but it'll at least give them the chance. And the answer was to build a media company. The reason for that, do you know Joseph Campbell?
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So I read The Power of Myth when I was like, I don't know, 21 or something. It totally changed my life in ways maybe we'll get into later, but in very deep and profound ways. And in that, he said, if you want to change the world, change the metaphor. And what it made me realize, at the end of the day, there's only one way that humans assimilate truly disruptive information. And I needed them to totally disrupt the way that they were thinking. And the way that people assimilate that information is through narrative.
Yeah.
So you got books, comic books, TV shows, movies, and video games. Those are the 5 dominant forms of narrative that we have now that we could give somebody an empowering mindset. So pair that with the timing, and you've got the opportunity to build a social following as a broadcaster. And then on the other side for us, we're building traditional narrative content. But this all feeds into my obsession with a total merchandising strategy from a financial standpoint, and why Disney is different than everybody else and what they did right, that every studio in their wake has done wrong, and why we think we'll be the ones to do it the right way.
Okay, and this is the guy with the hero's journey concept as well.
Correct.
Okay, which is, again, I guess, kind of a metaphor and a narrative, kind of, and a whole idea of that rolled into one, which is very powerful as well, and it's everywhere. I use it, I've even used it in my TED Talk without thinking I used it, and we actually encourage a lot of our Academy members to tell their own hero's journey as an exercise in reframing their failures. And so you can use them as these huge assets that you kind of bring back to the world, you know, of all your learned lessons. So I love this idea. Weren't you too busy building $1 billion company? Or were you now, was it time for you to mentally transition as well? Was it a timing thing too?
No, not at all. So for me, it really was looking at what is the best thing that I could do to build Quest. So Quest was meant to be my forever company. So I never intended to leave it. And the reason that the show originally was called Inside Quest was I had written these 25 bullet points called the Quest belief system, and they were the things that I had to do to my mind in order to go from, you know, staying in bed because I'm cold to being able to actually execute at the highest level of business and doing the hard things and suffering and all of that.
Right. I'm going to read some of those later.
Cool.
You created those in 2010, like back in the day, or was it more recent?
Yeah, that was probably 2011.
Okay.
But yeah, it was right around there. And so the reason that I had written those was I was really terrified that I was going to be taking something from people. And when you look at the hierarchy of a business, the way that people get rubbed the wrong way is they come in and they like work their asses off. And making protein bars is physically very demanding. So it was a very hard job, especially in the beginning. And I wanted to bring these people on, right? I don't care who you are now, I want to know who you want to become and all that. But I needed to make good on that promise. So I needed to help them become the person that they wanted to become. You talked about our unique culture. The unique culture was all about you can do anything you set your mind to. So that may take you away from me. So making protein bars is just your tuition. I want to help you become the person that you want to become. Don't lie. Like, really tell me where you want to go. And if that's to create a competing company, fine, I'll teach you everything I know. If that's to go on and do something totally different, but you're going to give me 2 years of your life and really commit, I'm all for it. But there had to be reciprocation on my side other than a paycheck. I just couldn't feel good about it otherwise. So the 25 bullet points were me saying, here, this is really what you're trying to learn here. But it's not about memorizing. So the show became my reaction to people could memorize them, and they would come up and say, hey, bullet 12 is this. And I'd be like, I literally don't know if that's true or not, because I don't have the bullet points memorized. I'm living them, but I'm not going to waste time memorizing them. People were doing the reverse. They were memorizing them, but they weren't living them. So I wanted to create the show, bring on the most successful people I could get my hands on, because I knew you're going to see over and over and over. Without them knowing what the 25 bullet points are, they're going to talk about the 25 bullet points.
Because you selected the guests, or because you asked the questions, or how would every episode...
They are the most fundamental truths of the human condition.
Really, that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
They are the most foundational things that I could think of given the anatomical structures of our brain. Like, we are a certain way. Human animals, like, for all of our differences, our similarities are infinitely more striking.
Okay, but pulling out those points is something that I would say you uniquely do by having guests on, like, say, a Simon Sinek, because otherwise CNN and Fox would be pulling these 25 points out on a regular basis. I mean, it takes a talent to show people those, right?
You have to be going down a certain path. So the path in my interviews that I'm going down is all about mindset. And whenever possible, how did you shape your mindset to get where you are, right? My favorite narrative, because I think it's the most empowering, is an authentic, true story about how somebody goes from not believing in themselves, having a fixed mindset, to believing anything is possible and actually executing against that, and being able to articulate the steps along the way. So my fundamental belief, and I don't think anybody could convince me otherwise, is that, like Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but rather the most adaptive to change. So humans become the apex predator, not because they're stronger, smarter, faster, because they're more adaptive. So if we are the ultimate adaptation machine, then we need to get rid of all these old notions about what we're capable of. By the time that we hit, I mean, people think that by the time you're like 19, your life is over, right? And you've learned what you're going to learn, and that's it. And I mean, there's just so much neuroscience around the fact that that's just not true. So getting people to show that, like how they did it, to tell stories. I mean, you talked about it in the beginning. I make no attempts to be cool because I don't think that pulls people out of the matrix. Me saying I'm a born entrepreneur when I'm clearly not, like that doesn't help the millions, hundreds of millions of people that are struggling in the way that I struggled, that really can become an entrepreneur or whatever else they want if they put their mind to it.
So your employees are coming up. By the way, this is rule number 8, and I love it, and I just wanted to pick out a few because it's very poignant here. This is Quest University. Making food products is just how you pay your tuition. See beyond your job description to the opportunity of becoming the best version of yourself. So I love that concept, and again, that's like the ultimate mission. So, the work here is just so you can become better, educate yourself, build the best you, and all that other stuff, which is really interesting. But my point is that people would come to you and say, Tom, what's number 7, what's number 13? And you're like, tell you what, I'm going to create media and narratives that's going to constantly instill these values into your head.
Correct.
So it was internal first, or you thought, I want to tell the world this as well?
No, literally it was called Inside Quest because it was meant for the people inside Quest.
Okay.
And then as we were doing it, it was like, man, this social thing. So we were early adopters of social media. So we were planning out our Facebook strategy back in 2009 when other people thought like, that's just a distraction. We could really see how it had potential. But as things were migrating towards the personal side, like finally me stepping out front, which I'd never wanted to do, which I get, people are never gonna believe that that's true because now I'm so out front, like aggressively, but really didn't. And my chief marketing officer literally for years kept saying, dude, we need to do a show around you. We need to do a show around you. And that felt so icky to me. And I had lied on Facebook about my birthday, which is still fake on my Facebook page, because I was convinced someone was going to steal my identity, right? So that's where I start.
Okay.
And I've really had to like evolve here with social media. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's where I start, and finally realizing I think this is starting to get away from me, and that personal branding is going to be a thing, that stepping out front would be very advantageous. People have a natural inclination to gravitate towards an individual, not a company. Yeah. So let me start doing this. I think I have a viewpoint that would be useful to people. So then we did Inside Quest as an opportunity, outbound, as an opportunity for the world to learn what does Quest stand for. And this goes back to my obsession with Disney. At one point in the 30s and 40s, Disney was probably the most famous person alive. And he really lived the ethos of his brand. And look, post his death, like there's some controversy around that, but that's what he stood for and represented, and really went out of his way to craft that when he was alive. And obviously that fed into the brand narrative, which is just incredibly important. Now we live in a world where you can't fake it anymore. Social media is too ubiquitous. You're gonna get caught out at some point. So I think the only way forward is to really be authentic. But in being authentic and stepping out front and in putting out a message that is actually useful and advantageous to the people that listen to it, you can tell people, this is what my brand stands for. This is what we're doing. Come look behind the scenes. Get to know me as a human being. Like, look me in the eye on a weekly basis, certainly, possibly on a daily basis. Follow me around, see what I do. And then you'll know what the why. So we've talked about Simon Sinek. You'll know the why of my company, right? You'll get that. You'll understand what I'm driven by, what I'm trying to accomplish. And then also, I'm sure, in fact, I will prognosticate here. Every day, tell me if this is true, every day someone writes to you and says, you, Brian Rose, have changed my life. Is that true?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it must be,
it's amazing.
Right? You're putting out all this, I have the chills. You put out all this amazing content with good intentions, which you said off camera was so cool, I wish we'd been recording. You said, God, with a bad setup and good intentions, you can still do amazing things. I love that. So when you have good intentions, you're really trying to do amazing stuff for people, they can feel that. And so I feel like we're living through sort of the second wave of the social revolution now, where it's about who are you as a person, how does that feed into your brand, what is all of this, and what do I get out of it as a consumer, right? So in your case, you're changing people's lives. The same thing I'm trying to do. I actually want to change people's lives. So this is me at Quest going, Quest is a company about transformation. It's not about protein bars, right? We wanted to impact people's lives positively. So how do we push that to the next level? And Inside Quest, to me, was the obvious answer. Now, the reason I spun it out it's really hard to get people to see a brand that's we sold protein bars. There's no way around that.
Right.
That sells protein bars to become this media company that's all about mindset and all that. So we were building two separate audiences, and so that was becoming weird. And I just had to be honest. Like, there are two things that I have to do in my life, and that's to address the two pandemics that we face: the pandemic of the body and the pandemic of the mind. And I felt the pandemic of the body, it's now moving. I've got two partners. They're going to keep running with it. They'll make that magic happen. But no one's doing this. And so transitioned out, took the studio that we had built there and turned it into a literal standalone media company with aspirations of being bigger than Disney one day. So that's our plan.
Okay. And do you think a company can only do one thing? I mean, do you think if you get big enough and the public knows you as that, is that the conclusion that you kind of made, is that Quest is going to be the protein bar company and the media company has to be a separate entity?
I think you have two paths before you. You've got the Virgin path, where he started something like 300 companies under the Virgin brand. It's nuts.
Yeah.
8 of them or whatever become billion-dollar brands. That's equally crazy.
Yeah.
So
but the rest
clearly,
also fail.
Sure.
Like, there was a whole story the other day about all these Virgin brands you've never heard of that were just like crazy. Virgin Brides, I don't know if everyone remembers that.
Virgin Condoms.
Yeah. Virgin
also
all these failures too, which
weird.
is a beautiful thing. But you were saying, sorry, there's two
Yeah, so that's path one is, you find a way to detach the brand identity from the product.
Right.
Which we were not able to do at Quest.
Okay.
So, and maybe we could have, like, if my partners and I had really shared that vision and they were willing to go with me, but that's a lot of risk. So when you look back at Virgin, he had to buy his Virgin Music co-founder out because he didn't see the transatlantic, airline that Richard wanted to do.
Yeah,
so
and why would he?
Right.
Yeah.
So, hey, let me make this easy. Bottom out.
The company.
Exactly. So you've got to have a very strong vision. Oftentimes it's counterintuitive. Oftentimes it's deeply personal, and you're the only one that's going to see that through. So we didn't share the vision for that. And so rather than try to force that, make them uncomfortable, we had such an amazing run. For 14 years we were partners, utterly transformative in my life. And still technically I'm just not there in a day-to-day role, but still I'm a partner in the company. Really believe in it, think it's going to crush. I evangelize for the brand. But this gave me an opportunity to, we had been so successful financially. It gave me an opportunity to start something new. I co-founded it with my wife, who's just amazing. And we've not only worked together, but we've been married now for 15 years. So we know how to work together. We know how to build something. So that was why we spun it out into a standalone. But hopefully we'll be a little more strategic in how we place the brand. It can be more flexible. And then option 2, to go back to the brand thing. So if option 1 is Virgin, option 2 is essentially what Quest is doing. Quest makes protein bars, and it's known for that, and it wants you to know it for that, and it's going to double down on that. And I think they're both very sound strategies. One may require a little more tolerance for risk than the other, but you've seen Apple, right? Another one it may seem obvious what they're doing now, but Apple TV, from Apple computers, the iPod, all of it, the iPhone was very counterintuitive.
Very much so, yeah. And so you were, Inside Quest was around for a year or 2 years?
It's about 18 months.
Okay, and it was internal first and then you opened it up, or it was always something that other people could consume?
By the time we actually went live, we went out to everybody. But at first, it was just a YouTube channel and we weren't really doing other socials. And then we started really getting more strategic because I didn't worry about whether it caught on with the world at large. It was really just focused. As long as the employees are watching it and digging it, we're good. But then it was just well, if we're going to do it, let's really do it. Okay. And so we did about, I think, just shy of 100 episodes of Inside Quest.
With guests on each episode?
Yeah.
That was always the way it was?
Always. We did a couple clip shows, but yeah.
So how many episodes have you filmed with different guests at this point?
Oh, now we've done, it's got to be 135, somewhere around there.
Okay, all right. And before we get into the next iteration, Disney, what do you see in Disney? Why do most people sleep on Disney? Or they don't see the beautiful things they did in the past?
I literally can't. Actually, I know exactly why. People aren't disciplined. So if I say to you, hey, I'm going to go see a Warner Brothers movie, you know nothing about it. Could be uplifting, could be tragic, could be heartbreaking, a horror film, who knows, right? Could be anything. But if I say I'm going to go see a Disney movie, you know something about it. I don't have to tell you anything else. I'm going to go see a Disney movie. You already know something. So he being Walt Disney, understood that they had to stand for something, that the brand Disney, in and of itself, had to stand for something. And it can't just be quality, right? So everybody's going to say that. Well, it stands for quality. Quality what? So he really understood that it needed to be, and this isn't the language he would use, I don't think, but the magic of childhood, right? Just capturing that thing that we all feel as kids. Whether you're a child or an adult, you can all relate to that magic of those like simple, beautiful moments in life. Yeah. And they captured that, and the brand ethos maintained that for a very long time. Then buying Pixar was a no-brainer. There was so much, connection between the two in terms of their ethos and the way that they work and the type of product that they put out. That was a no-brainer. But then the other thing that they do is they're looking at all the culturally relevant intellectual property out there that can be merchandised, and they buy it. So buying Marvel was one of the smartest things they've ever done. Buying Star Wars was amazingly smart. And they've been using, since the 1930s, they've been using a total merchandising strategy, which means Disney sees their primary sources of revenue, not the piece of art that you create, but the merchandising that you sell around it. So it's what I'll call the shout and echo model. So the movie is the shout, the merchandising is the echo, and it's the echo that makes the money. So looking at that and knowing that from a technological standpoint, we're now moving into an era where things can be made on demand, you don't have to have the inventory risk. So here I am thinking, how do you build a studio in the modern era? You've got social media, it can be done essentially for free. Certainly the distribution of it can be done for free. You've got the opportunity to merchandise, which you can do for basically you don't pay until you make it. So it's perfect. You're paying out of cash flows, which is just an incredible place to be. And I think that that's going to happen to more and more pieces of the industry as 3D printing comes down in cost, becomes more ubiquitous, can print in more materials. Like that's just going to get more and more interesting. So now, because what I wanted was, when I look at, okay, if I'm going to compete with Disney or I'm going to compete with Sony, Warner Brothers, all that, they're willing to throw $200 million at a tentpole film. Like that's crazy. Like how do you compete with that? So, and I think in the next 7 years, one of the major studios is going to go under because you miss 2 or 3 times in a row and you're done. Like that's it, you just go out of business. So I think they're making way too big of risks in a time where, do you know who E.L. James is?
Sounds familiar.
50 Shades of Grey.
Okay, yeah,
The author.
The author, yeah.
She had 5 million readers before she published the book. Think about that for a second. 5 million readers before she ever published the book. That's insane. Like that's never happened before. There's no way to do it. So she went on a website, wrote it all on this fan fiction website, got a huge following, and then she went to a publisher and said, would you like to publish my book that has 5 million followers? The only answer is yes, of course we would, right? And that book has sold some just ungodly number of copies. So that puts us in a position where as content creators, if you're trying to be a studio, if you're trying to be something bigger than a multi-level or a multi-channel network, I think you're just looking for virality. You need to give your community an ethos. So going back to Disney understanding that the brand ethos has to stand for something. So my new company, Impact Theory, it stands for something, right? It's going from pulling someone out of the matrix, going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And it's hero's journey from 1,000 different directions, right? I can tell 1,000 different stories, but it's all that same uplifting transition of going from that fixed mindset to the growth mindset. So that's how we want to feed into that, but we want to do it by going out to the community with that ethos, asking them to submit ideas. We then filter the ideas, make sure that they make sense with the brand ethos, give them back to the community for them to actually create real properties, which then come back to us, and we look for the virality in that. So there's a technology layer that we're working on now that hopefully in the next year we'll have ready that'll allow us to gamify that sort of interaction back and forth with the different ideas and properties and things like that. And right now we're working on securing the life rights to people whose stories I think are just unbelievable. Some of whom
famous people or not famous
some
people?
of them we'll call have a very low level of celebrity for their specific life. A couple of them have been guests on our show, so I know how good their stories are and how much our audience resonates.
What is a life right?
So you would go and say for $1 option, Brian, I'm going to pay you $1, and now I control the rights to your life for the next, let's say, 2 years.
Okay.
And I have 2 years to get it turned into something, either a comic book, a TV show, a movie, whatever we agree on.
Okay.
And then from there, like every time we hit a hurdle, you make money. Okay. So if the $1 is obviously nothing, but let's say when the first comic goes into production, then you get a bump. When it gets picked up as a TV show, then you would get a bigger bump. But if you're really smart, Brian, and I know you are, then what you really want is a piece of the merchandising rights.
Right, okay.
Right, so, and that's our thing. Total transparency, total authenticity, letting people know, like, and I'm telling people exactly how we're building a modern studio because I know no one else has the discipline to follow me.
Okay. Merchandising. When I hear that, and based on this narrative, I'm thinking Star Wars action figures. And I'm in the media business, and honestly, most media people, unless you're Disney, they don't even think about physical products. I mean, sure they do, I guess, if they're selling them later. But what does that look like?
Well, it looks exactly like that. The shirt that I'm wearing right now is one of our shirts that, you know, buy it and it gets printed at that moment, and I hold no inventory risk or anything like that, and we can routinely put them up.
What does this stand for?
Toughen the fuck up, Buttercup. So
it's going to be the title of this episode.
And literally, it was one of those things where in the middle of a Q&A, a live Q&A on Facebook, somebody said like, hey, this is a situation, what should we do? And I was just like, look, sometimes you just got to toughen the fuck up, Buttercup. And then people started writing, oh my God, please make that a t-shirt, right? That's the world that we live in. So then we made it as a t-shirt, goes live, people can buy it. So, but that's like totally minor. The real play is to make a property that resonates with people, like a Disney film, and now it becomes a part of your identity. So think about Star Wars, right? This story changed the world. It didn't change it as much as you'd think. But George Lucas makes this film that nobody thinks is going to be a success. Okay, so he had just directed THX 1138, totally avant-garde, sort of weird.
It is weird.
Didn't make a lot of money, but then he makes American Graffiti. American Graffiti hasn't released yet, and he gets Star Wars. He makes Star Wars, American Graffiti still hasn't come out, okay? When he makes Star Wars, the crew's walking off set. They all think it's this ridiculously stupid children's film that's never going to amount to anything, and nobody believes in it but him. And finally, when he's ready to go make it, he realizes they're not going to promote this movie. Like, the studio now doesn't believe in it. There's been so much like kerfuffle on the set with the cinematographer and everybody saying like this movie's a joke. They're not going to promote it. They're just going to let it die. So then American Graffiti comes out. So Star Wars in the can, he knows no one's going to do anything with it. American Graffiti comes out, and I think becomes the first movie to cross $100 million. If it wasn't the first, it was one of like the rarest few, becomes absolutely massive. And the studio realizes, uh-oh, we've got to keep this kid happy. So they go back to him and they want to like triple, quintuple, whatever, what they had paid him to do Star Wars. And he says, don't pay me any more money. Let me maintain the merchandising rights so that I can make sure that I can market this film. He's not thinking like, oh, the merchandising rights are going to be worth something. He wants to make t-shirts and posters just to get the word out. And he knows that the studio can stop him if he doesn't have the merchandising rights. So he retains the merchandising rights for that reason and that reason alone. And then when the movie comes out and it becomes the astronomical hit that it is, now all of a sudden he realizes, oh dear God, what I made on actually making the movie is a pittance compared to what I'm making over here. And I mean, he's made billions of dollars on the merch. So it's going to be rare that you have a hit like that, right? Most of them aren't going to be that. Most of them are going to be base hits. But the problem is, this is where everybody else falls down. If you think about a Warner Brothers or you think about a Sony, they have to reinvent themselves every time because there's no like continuation from the last movie. It's why they like sequels. Because at least then there's some merchandising carryover, all the relationships that you've established with the merch and the manufacturers and knowing like what hair color Jack Sparrow's beard should be. Like all of that stuff has already been decided. So it's way easier. So now they try to stay in that ecosystem as long as they can, but that's not their studio model, right? Their studio model is a breadth, everything. Make any good story. We make good stories, right? It doesn't feed into a brand ethos. So without that, there's this constant need to reinvent, which is why they're always pulling back on the merchandise, because from a technical standpoint, do you know how many decisions you have to make? Think about every decision you made. We were talking about it before, right? The chairs face each other. You had to actually argue that with your team. So now multiply that across 1,000 pieces of merchandise for a single film property, everybody's exhausted and taxed. So it's just never being maximized, except by Disney, because they're still selling Mickey Mouse, dude. Mickey Mouse came out in the 1930s, and they still sell Mickey Mouse. So it's like they stumbled upon something. Walt was a genius. I don't care how or why, but they stumbled on it, but nobody's copying it. So, but when I find myself slipping out of the rhythm, every time it's because of lack of discipline. It's, I see another story that I'm moved by and I want to tell it. But it's like, if it doesn't fit the brand ethos, you can't, because you devalue the top level brand, which means you devalue your ability to do merch. So, and at the end of the day, the merch, and it comes, I mean, we can get really complicated here. It comes down to what's called self-signaling. Right? So I wear this shirt to an interview. You're wearing the suit, right? Oh, I love your stories about the suit, because you used to be wearing like, oh God, like it wasn't Ed Hardy, but it was like G-Star jeans. Like, you had such a different vibe, and then you switched it over to the suit. Makes you feel differently, makes me feel differently about you, and your goal was largely to tell me who you are, but I know you use affirmations a lot, so it's like you're sort of dressing in a way that's a sort of physical affirmation, if you will. So me wearing a shirt reminding me to toughen the fuck up is important to me. So it's meant to say something to you, but when we signal loudest to ourselves.
Interesting. So self-signaling. Okay.
Becomes a huge part.
And so most studios don't have the discipline to stay on brand to make that Disney merchandise model work, and they'll just go to the fair weather. Oh, okay, we got to do this because they're desperate for those quarterly earnings.
On trend.
Okay. And just to finish up the merch question, in 10 years from now, what other merch might you sell me?
Man, that's a great question. I'd love to see a lot of physical merch. That would be like the most exciting thing for me, would be to be in a world where we're 3D printing on demand, or I mean, quite frankly, getting to the point where we just know like this unit sells. And so like when a t-shirt hits and has true virality, then we do the screen printing and we hold inventory and all that, because we can get better margins and do special things for the customer because we're the ones shipping it. Okay. So I mean, there's reasons to do that stuff, but it will be so dependent on the property that it's really hard to prognosticate. But we'll win when we've got bed sheets, socks, watches, lampshades, sleeping bags, you know, apps, like it on
apps as well. So digital products as well. Okay, but kind of less than $100 type things.
Depends, man. If you want to buy a custom Tesla that's in one of our properties, like the Impact Theory Tesla, and they want to partner, I'm all for it.
That's fascinating. I'm really glad we had this discussion, because I've never heard this idea talked about when it comes to like digital media, and it's fascinating. Maybe that's because you come from a physical product side, that you don't try to ignore it like so many quote unquote media people do.
Well, so you're about to live in a world where people are going to ask the question, why should I pay for this thing that feels like it should be free? Right? Yeah. So, and I am telling you, we are all at the tip of a very large iceberg where people are going to be compelled to give away. And you've got an awesome model because you give as much away as anybody might need to really make a transformation, but invite them into a deeper world if that's what they want. And that to me is sort of the only sustainable model, but like so much more is going to be given away for free, right? Think about a singer who just is, they need the attention, right? So if you think about, don't worry about selling your music. That would be my biggest tip. Don't sell your music. Go on tour, build a following, make people feel touched by your music, and they will take care of you forever. If they don't feel touched by your music, now you're in trouble. So that's where I think the music industry got a little bit lazy there for a while, because there was so much money to be made in record sales. You didn't have to worry so much about touring. Now as it's touring, it becomes touring and being an influencer. So working with a brand to tell people, hey, go buy this, you know, because I rep it. That becomes the way that people really monetize. But I think for people like us that are putting out this content, to ignore physical product will 10 years from now be a death knell if you don't start thinking about it today. But because you'll have a good, I mean, it'll be a sliding scale of decreasing returns, but you'll have a good run for the next 5 to 10 years, but it will dry up.
Okay, interesting. Let's talk about our good friend Simon Sinek.
Yes.
Start with why. It's interesting to look at your show and maybe even our show and a bunch of shows out there and say, what was their why? You know, and you started it to kind of reflect those internal corporate values that you felt so passionate about, that were really human values. But you didn't start it to necessarily make money. You didn't start it to be a YouTube internet famous. Like, you can see the why in every brand out there. And whether it's Joe Rogan or Mark Maron or you or Fox News, like the why is down in there. You don't have to look that hard to find it, whether it's me in the chair placements or all that stuff. I mean, for London Real, like, this wasn't even a company for 3 years, you know, and like it was just me broadcasting to get my demons out and to try to connect with the world, and because it was so much goddamn fun and connecting. But you know, when you think about your why and what, you know, what your media brand is, you know, do you think about how yours is different than everything else, and does it change? And do you look back to those first 10 episodes, and are those similar to your last 10 episodes?
Yeah, they are actually somewhat similar. I think what you'd find is I talked a lot more in the early episodes, and I don't talk as much now.
Why is that,
and that
do you think?
Maturity, as an interviewer, understanding how to get better answers, needing to put less of myself out there to create the energy on set, like doing some of that as sort of pre-producing on the way in. And then quite honestly, like, I was beginning to realize I needed to establish myself, because I was so asking the question, why should anybody care about me? And so I felt I had to establish myself. So yeah, just as I've gained more confidence, I've, you know, the guy that shows up the lowest dressed is usually the most successful person in the room. Like, that's, you know, so I've just gotten to the point now where I know I'm doing a good job, so I don't have to be so loud.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
You have said it so well. Your brain is playing a game on you, which I call the Matrix, and you're in the Matrix. Have you ever heard the David Foster Wallace speech, "This is Water"?
No.
Oh, dude, you got a great one coming for you. Okay. Listen to it, it's amazing. And the whole speech is about how a fish is the last one to realize that he's in water. It's so ubiquitous, it's so a part of his life that he totally takes it for granted, like us with air, right? We're moving through it all the time, but yet it had to be actually discovered at one point. So there are things in your belief system that are that ubiquitous, that ever present, that much of a foundational building block of who you are, that you don't even question it.